you for your time. I want to mention that this is a joint effort. This is a WHA. We love to use acronyms, which is the Western Hemisphere Education USA LL.M webinar series. So we just want to give a shout out to all the participants, the people who helped organize this from the entire, from North America all the way down to South America. So this is our Education USA WHA LL.M webinar series. I would like to kick it off by introducing Sydney Matthews at UCLA, and she will start with some introductions and we'll get started with the event. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jason. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen to make sure that you all know you're in the right place and coming to the correct presentation. So good evening. My name is Sydney Matthews. I'm the Graduate Studies Manager from UCLA School of Law. And before I get started with the presentation, I wanted to allow my other colleagues on the call to introduce themselves to give you a sense of who you're going to meet and be able to speak with later in our individual Zoom room. So I'll throw it over to Monique.
Thank you so much, Sydney. My name is Monique McCarthy. I am the Senior Director of Admissions at Georgia State University College of Law in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'll turn it over to Bridget.
Thank you, Monique. My name is Bridget Sandusky. I'm the Assistant Dean of Graduate Law Programs at Suffolk University Law School in Boston, Massachusetts. And I will turn to Maria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Landry, and I am the Director of Admission at Tulane Law School in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I am turning into Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Hartley. I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions and Global Engagement at St. John's Law in New York City. And I will turn it to Danielle.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Danielle Flores de Benzerga, and I serve the Office of Graduate Degree Programs at Columbia Law School. Back to you, Sydney.
Thanks so much, guys. Okay, so welcome again. So this presentation is going to cover how to apply to an LL.M program via Lsac essentially, and the financing options as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully you can see this next slide. So just to give you a sense of exactly what we're going to be covering during this presentation, first we're going to go through Lsac and essentially what is a personal statement. Then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague who's going to cover Lsac and the search process. Then we're going to go through the application process as is laid out via Lsac. We're going to go through the types of LL.M concentrations that you can sort of expect to find and how to search for those. And then we're also going to talk through bar exam options, advantages, and state differences. And then lastly, financing the LL.M. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on my portion of the presentation, which is essentially going to be covering the personal statement. Okay, so on Lsac, the one item that you really need to pay attention to in terms of making sure that the correct school receives this item is your personal statement. So you will have the option of uploading a different personal statement to each university. So you really want to be cognizant that UCLA is receiving your UCLA personal statement, Tulane is receiving Tulane's personal statement, and so on and so forth, since you will have the option of writing different personal statements for every school, right? And because every school may have different requirements in terms of expectations of word length or document length, you really want to do your research and make sure you're looking at each school's requirements regarding a personal statement and tailoring your personal statement not only content-wise to what you would, how you feel like you'd be a good fit for that program, but also paying attention to their parameters in terms of what they're looking for technically within a personal statement. Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of folks who are applying to an LL.M program, including many people on the call, are not going to be native English speakers. So on top of submitting, a TOEFL score or an IELTS score as proof of your English ability, this is really a great opportunity, i.e. via your personal statement, to demonstrate to the admissions committee the strength of your writing and the strength of your English ability. So it's essential that you proofread your personal statement to make sure that you've dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, you've used all the correct, conjugation and the tenses and all that type of stuff. You want to make sure it's sort of pristine, because poor English in your personal statement can reflect poorly sort of in terms of even if you submit a strong TOEFL score, it is again a reflection of your sort of spoken English ability, even though it is a writing sample. So kind of really important to keep that in mind in terms of when you're putting together a personal statement. Another thing to consider within your personal statement is the audience that is going to be reviewing your personal statement, right? So this could be different folks depending on which school is looking at your personal statement. So it may be solely an admissions team, it may be professors that are looking at your personal statement, it may be, student readers. But one thing that's important to remember, no matter who is going to be reading your statement, is that they will likely only read it one time. So it's important that, you're sort of concise and to the point, and memorable in terms of what you're saying, because they really probably are not going to be reading it another time. You really have one shot to make an impression via your personal statement. So in terms of what do, folks put in their personal statement and what is the expectation, really, I would say no answer is wrong as long as it's a true representation of, why you're looking to apply to the program. But there's a few sort of things that most people will hit upon. So first of all, why are you pursuing the LLM, right? So that could mean, are you looking to pursue a specialization? If your whole reasoning for applying to a school is because of the strength of that faculty in that area of law, that's something that you definitely want to touch upon. Are you looking to do an LLM program to become eligible to sit for a bar exam? Is it going to help you in your career in some way? Are you looking to change career paths and, focusing on a new area of law at a US law school help you break into that industry? Just help us understand why going to X university will assist you with advancing your personal or career goals, right? Another factor of that is what brought you to your career at this point. So, that could mean if you had previous either work experience or you had a different degree, or something happened in your life that sort of made you think now is the moment that I need to go back to school because I've, now had this drive to study something new, or I'm just at this crossroads in my career where this is really the crucible of my life where I need to make a decision and sort of push my career forward by doing an LLM at X university. That's something that you want to address within your personal statement. And again, the aspect that I have on this slide of how will completing an LLM at school X help you achieve your academic goals, that can also just be addressed by thinking through, again, are there faculty members that work there that align with, what you want, they teach in subjects that you want to learn about? Is there specific coursework that's being offered? Are there specializations that are being offered? Is going to school at a specific location, will that give you access to an industry that you want to work in? Just helping the administrators and the faculty members and the students reading your personal statement understand why what you want to do and what you want to get out of the program aligns with what that program can offer you. And again, lastly, no answer is wrong as long as it's sort of a truthful representation of what you're trying to get out of the program and your reasoning for applying. And then also some just sort of like American-y aspects of things that it's okay to sort of talk about within a personal statement that sometimes aren't always the case in an international context is it's okay to sort of stand out and describe what sets yourself apart, even if it seems sort of boastful, again, because you're really only going to be reading your personal statement one time. So you really want to highlight everything that you have going for you. If it's your career highlights, if it's the amazing grades you got at law school, if it's all of your extracurricular activities, like while that may not be how you would normally come across in real life, that's really what we want to hear about in a sort of concise manner, just hit after hit, kind of in a personal statement. So really don't be shy about highlighting, what would make you an outstanding candidate. And the last thing that I would say about personal statements and like the American perspective to writing personal statements is sometimes, it can be helpful for us to hear from you about how do you as an individual, meaning if you had a previous degree in a different subject area, where you grew up, your previous work history, all of that type of stuff, how does that make you a unique candidate, and that how will it inform your perspective that you're bringing to the classroom, and how will that help build a unique classroom experience for everybody that you're going to school with, right? So an example I would give would be, for example, if we have somebody, so UCLA has a entertainment specialization. So we have a lot of folks applying to our entertainment program. So if we have someone who is currently a music lawyer in Brazil, who is looking to apply to UCLA to do an entertainment specialization, and they want to focus on music, that's their whole reason for coming to school. They would be in a position within their personal statement to say, you know, I have extensive real world work history working in the music industry in Brazil. If I am in an American classroom sitting with JD students, most of whom have never worked in the real world before as entertainment lawyers, I'm bringing a new perspective, meaning my background in music law in Latin America, to this American classroom experience. And that perspective is unique and probably will be different from other people who are in that class. So just kind of thinking through how your work, you know, your work history, your life history, where you're from, would make you a unique candidate in terms of building the classroom experience for yourself and others. So those are the sort of aspects I would, you know, I would suggest that you think about when you're putting together your personal statement. And again, the lengths of personal statements will vary depending on the university, but I would say maybe 2 to 3 pages, double space tends to be kind of a standard length, but you definitely would want to look at each university's website or on Lsac to confirm what their expectations are with regard to the personal statement. Okay, and this is just information about my Zoom room. So again, I'm Sydney Matthews, I'm the Graduate Studies Manager from UCLA School of Law. So if you have further questions about UCLA, I would welcome you to join my Zoom room later at the end of this call. But I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues at Georgia.
Thank you so much, Sydney. So you might have decided now you want to pursue an LLM. Where do you even begin? Like, where do you start to determine to learn about different programs or even start the application process? Well, a good start is the Law School Admission Council, lsac.org. So their website provides a host of opportunities for you to learn about other law schools. So when you go to LSAC's website, they have 2 distinct areas. So you can either go to the JD programs, which is the first professional degree in the United States or Canada that will allow you to be able to practice law. As most of you have already earned a law degree, it might be a bachelor's of law or its equivalent, you might be looking primarily at LLM or master's of law programs. So you want to make sure you select the right track to get the information, because not every law school that has a JD program will also have an LLM program. So you go to the website lsac.org and you select the LLM degree programs. From there, you can search the official guide to LLM masters and other programs. So this is where they will have all the colleges and universities, the law schools in the United States and Canada that have LLM programs. You can create an account, and creating the account is free. So we strongly recommend that you create that initial account to allow you to be able to access some of LSAC's resources to build your own list. Then you can start searching for law schools. Now, this is where you really need to determine what are your professional goals or what are your personal goals. Because do you want to seek an LLM for the practice of law in the United States, which might be a bar examination track? Are you interested in learning more about US law? Are you interested in comparative law? So the US versus another kind of law? Or do you want to do more program-specific information? Do you want to specialize in tax or international law or business and corporate law or health law? So it's helpful to determine what your personal and professional goals are so that you can start to build that list of law schools. Then you can request specific information from those individual law schools that you may be considering. On the LSAC's website, they'll have general information about each of these programs. That's where schools can share their specializations and what they have to offer. But then you can visit their individual websites where you can find out more robustly about the curriculum, the length of time, the cost, the faculty, the location, the alumni. What are the advantages of pursuing an LLM at these individual schools? So once you've done your research, you want to build those that list of professional goals. But LSAC is just one of the resources that may be available to you. Next slide, if you don't mind, Sydney. So in addition to the LSAC, you can also visit the American Bar Association. So the American Bar Association is that accrediting authority for law schools in the United States. So they have to give permission for schools to be able to offer JD and LLM programs. So they do have resources for post JD programs. Those are programs after that might include the LLM. You can also review LLM Guide and LLM Study. I will say that the American Bar Association's website will also give you information about how the LLM student population measures up with the JD student population at the schools that you may be considering. Keep in mind that some students might want to, after they've earned their LLM, then potentially transition to the JD program at that particular law school or another law school, but not every school will allow you to be able to make that transition. So it's really important that you do your research, determine which one of those schools will allow you to kind of best achieve those personal and professional goals. Sydney, next slide. So I invite you to learn more about Georgia state law. There's our Zoom room, of course, that will be shared later on, but also our contact information. I am Monique McCarthy, but with our email, Law LLM, any number of the admission staff who work primarily with LLM students would be more than happy to assist you. Thank you so much for your time. I will turn over to Bridget.
Thank you so much. So my name is Bridget Sandusky, and I'm going to give a brief overview about the LSAC application process. Next slide, please, Sydney. So the first thing that you really need to do is get organized. So you've already received some great advice about how you can do your search. And then once you have that information, you're going to see, how do I apply next? What do I need to do? First, you need to make sure not every law school requires you to utilize LSAC. Many of us do, but some do not. But it really is a time-saving measure for you. So if one or two of the schools that you're applying to require LSAC and all the other ones say you can if you want to, or you don't have to, it's worth your time. It's to make things easier for you so that you're submitting all of your documentation just one time, your transcripts, your letters of recommendation. So in the end, it's going to save you time. Next slide, please. So there's a variety of different services that you'll be utilizing through LSAC. So sometimes this can be a little confusing. First, there's this electronic application service that's you just creating an application within LSAC. That's separate from that application fee that you would be paying to a university. Universities with their application fee, and I'm speaking for Suffolk, but I know many of my colleagues as well, will often waive application fees. Oftentimes it's as little as just asking when you're emailing any of us and say, can I get a fee waiver? Some of us will have that on our websites. So I would encourage you, if finances are an issue, to certainly outreach and ask. It's worth the opportunity to ask. Don't be shy about that. Many applicants will do so. Then you have the document assembly service. So that is when LSAC is taking all the various pieces of your application and putting them together for you. And then as an international student, an important part of that application process is a credential evaluation and certification. So LSAC is using an outside provider of the registrars, and they will both authenticate your transcripts and then they will do an evaluation for your grades. Are they average? Are they above average? Are they below average? So it really, we all understand and know that legal educational systems and grading systems vary quite substantially from country to country, and sometimes even within a country itself, of how various different schools are going to grade. So this gives us a little bit of a better understanding. Many of us that have been working in the field for quite some time are very familiar with certain countries because we'll receive many applications from there, but other individuals on an admissions committee, so faculty members, for example, might not be as familiar. So for us, having that makes it a little bit of an easier and I would say a fairer process because everybody has that same information. And then the law school reports. That's the time when you're telling LSAC, please send my complete application file to Suffolk Law School, to UCLA, to Tulane. And so for each time you do that, you are paying that $30 application fee as well. I will also say that some of my colleagues may also waive some of the other fees. At Suffolk, we routinely will waive an application fee, but I do know there are some other schools that will waive other additional fees as well. Next slide, please. So as in any good lawyer, and even when you're taking any of your exams, the first thing that we say, read the instructions. What are we asking for? You need to contact every educational institution that you have attended. So that means even if you haven't completed a degree, you transferred to another university where you earned your degree, even if your university is now closed, we need transcripts for each individual. So if a closed university, it might be through the education administrator. So you will use LSAC's transcript request form to send to each individual educational institution. You cannot send the transcripts in yourself. The transcripts have to come from the educational institutions, the Ministry of Education, whomever is going to be in control of those educational transcripts, and they will be coming to LSAC directly. That's very, very important. And then a credential evaluation will not be started until all of those transcripts are received. So even if you say, but I only went to this other university for one semester, and all my other 4.5 years I did at another university, that credential evaluation will not begin until that first transcript where you completed one semester is received by LSAC. Next slide, please. Then you need to contact your recommenders. So you're going to submit the names and contact information for your recommenders, and your recommenders will be contacted and they'll submit either an electronic copy or a hard copy to LSAC. And then you will have an opportunity to assign each of those letters to the individual law schools. So as prior speakers have indicated, if you want to make sure that you're sending the right letters to each school. Many of us, we all have received the letters, dear so-and-so, I'm recommending this student for this LLM program, and it's not your LLM program. We all like to think that we're special, even us on the admissions receiving side. So it does take your time and make sure when you're assigning the letters, if they are naming specific schools, make sure that's going to the right school. And then for TOEFL or IELTS, so if you are required to take an English language proficiency exam, those scores will be sent directly to LSAC. So make sure you use the LSAC institutional code. Some of us might accept other English language exams, so you can contact individually. For example, we accept Duolingo, but within LSAC, TOEFL and IELTS are the standardized English language proficiency exams that they accept. Next slide, please. And then lastly, you're going to be selecting the LLM programs where you want LSAC to send all of your documents. And the hardest part, waiting for the decisions to come in. So I know all of us, we are all working really hard. We know that you can't wait to receive our answers for us, and we're trying to get the decisions out to you as fast as possible. So we're always very grateful for your patience. We know it's it's difficult to wait for those final decisions from us. If you have any questions about the application process as you're moving forward through it, we know that it can be confusing. Really, the best individuals to contact is the LSAC LLM department. They will be able to guide you through the process. Maybe you check something else in error, what happened. You can call them by phone or you can send them an email, and they're really very responsive and quite helpful. And then next slide, please. And then I would encourage you to come to my Zoom room after tonight's presentation so that you can learn a little bit more about Suffolk Law School. And I will turn it over to Maria. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sydney. Next.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about the type of LLM concentration. So it seems a little bit that we're going back in time in the sense that you should make this decision before you go through LSAC, before you decide what schools to apply. So the first step when you're deciding to do an LLM is decide or have a talk to yourself, have a talk to your employees, to your school advisor, and decide and sit down and decide what are your professional interests, what are your career goals, where your strengths lie, and make a decision on, yeah, you now know that you want to do an LLM, but where should you do this LLM? And the question is oftentimes guided by ranks and other things that we'll see in a second, but sometimes you really know what area of law you want to focus. So sit down, decide what you want to do with that LLM, and that would be your first step to where to apply and how to go about that decision. Next slide. Next, thank you. And so the first thing that you have to do is you have to decide. There are general LLMs and there's specialized LLMs. So the concentration. So your first decision will have to be whether you want to do a general one, and the large majority of the schools that you will find on that LSAC list will have a general LLM, or if you now have decided that you really like this focus of law, you can look under LSAC, you can look under the LLM guide, you can look under LLM studies. There's a lot of different ways to find out what schools offer that concentration. For example, if you go to the LSAC website, just like Monique was explaining to you, go to the programs, other graduate programs, go to LLM, you have a little search tab that says keyword. And if you say, for example, if all you want to do is business law, if you write business, you will know that the list that comes below that will be a list that shows the state and the names of the schools. So what you can do then is you decide, you know what, I really like business, but I really like general. So you make a list of those schools that show up, and then you can narrow it down by the state. For example, I really don't want to go to this state, but I really want to go to this state, and this state has 4 different schools that offer that program. So make use of those, the databases that you have. Make use of LSAC, make use of LLM Guide to find the schools that have the concentrations. Because I know that sometimes it's very easy to just focus on, oh, I heard that everyone is an LLM at this school. Great, but that school might not be the best one for what you want to do, because that school might not have enough classes in maritime law. For example, Tulane has a lot of maritime classes, but we have none in health law, for example. So coming to us to do health law would make no sense. But for example, going to UCLA to do maritime law might not make a lot of sense, because they might have only a couple of classes to do it. So if you really know what to do, what classes what area of law you want to focus, go to that search and find out the schools that do the best programs on those. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Can you stay there? So sorry. And for the general one, For the general one, I just want to mention that, as I was saying, most schools have a general LLM program, and you can also figure out what those general LLM programs can be. So it can be a program that will give you, just like the previous speakers told you, a broad introduction to the US, or it can even be a program that it's general, but will allow you to focus in something that they're good. They might not call it the business LLM, but if you go through the list of courses that they offer, they might have a lot of classes in that field. So always keep in mind the general programs too. And the general programs are normally the ones that will give you the most flexibility, that will allow you to build classes for bar exams, for example. So keep the general LLMs in mind for that. Next slide, please. So on whether or not we want to do a concentration, and I think it goes back to what I was saying before. So first, of course, it's where your interest, your personal interest and your career goals lie, but also whether or not the concentration, the LLM in a specific field is going to boost your resume. It's going to make you stand out. Maybe maybe you now work for a company where everyone in the same company or the same law firm has a general LLM. So if there's a field there, if there's a department there that has been growing, like environmental law, for example, if that department in your law firm has been growing, shouldn't you be thinking about, and you like the field, shouldn't you be thinking about environmental law, because there's growth for that. You can boost your resume with that specific field of law. The other idea of doing a concentration is entering a new field of law that you like but haven't had the chance to explore before. But also there's downsides to the concentration, or to choosing a very specific LLM versus a general one. And that would be, you might be limiting your opportunities when you come back. People with that LLM, people might focusing just on that field. And let's say you do a banking LLM, and for 20 years is very interesting, but then you want to get out of that field, and you've been focusing just on that. So a general might be an idea if you're not sure if that's what you want to do the rest of your life, and you want to keep the door open, but you want the extra degree and the extra exposure. So all different things to consider when doing a concentration. Next slide, please. And so the last slide that I have to give, or the last advice that I have to give when it comes to the concentration, would be on how to decide. So again, it goes back to what you want to do. It goes back to your strengths. It goes back to maybe a small exposure to a field of law that you had in your first law degree, but didn't get the opportunity to explore, and you've always been curious about it, and the LLM will provide you that opportunity. So how do you decide what LLM or what school to choose for that LLM? Recognition of the program. And again, I go back to not just the school in general, but whether or not that school is known for that specific field of law. And I will say that there's very few rankings, or there's some unofficial rankings out there when it comes to the LLM concentrations, but they do exist. So even LLM Guide sometimes will put some of those unofficial rankings. But another way to really know is the alumni. Knowing everyone in the field has done an LLM at that school because it's very well known in that field, it will show you that, will create an alumni connection, will show you a network opportunity. So see where the people that are in that field of law that you like did their LLM, even if it's in a school that you've never heard before, but those people are doing very well in that field of law. You might want to pursue that program that you've never heard about before. Normally those schools will also have career fairs in those fields. And the last one would be faculty. If the programs have recognized faculty in that field, if the schools allow you to participate in journals in that field because it's an extra exposure. Clinics or internships sometimes are not easy to find when it comes to LLMs opportunities. So see if some of the schools have the clinics available for you in that field of law, and moot court. And last slide, please. And I think that's just one about how you can connect with Tulane. Yeah, so I'll be in the Zoom room, and I'll be more than happy to answer questions about the specific LLMs or about anything at all. Thank you. And I will pass on to Lauren.
Hello, thank you. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Sydney. Great, so I'm going to talk about admission to the bar. And when I say admission to the bar, that is the phrase that we use to mean that you are able to practice as an attorney in the particular US state or district where you practice. So the US, we have a federal system. We have 50 different states, and each state plus the District of Columbia all have their own procedures for admission. So yes, it's a little bit confusing even for us. But don't be afraid, your law schools are here to help you with this. I do think it's helpful, though, to step back and think about whether or not you want to pursue admission to the bar in a US state. This is something you probably want to decide before you go into your LLM program for a few reasons that I'll discuss. So it's something to think about now. You must be admitted as an attorney in the US. I'm a practicing attorney. I'm admitted to the state of Pennsylvania. And you have to have that professional certification to practice, and that means to file paperwork in court, to represent clients on legal matters. So for you, think about this. Would this be advantage to your career or not? For example, I'm at St. John's Law in New York City. We have a number of students who come to us who are local to the New York area. And so they stay and practice in the New York area. So they absolutely want to be barred. They're going to practice, in real estate or immigration or, family law. So they want to be barred in New York. They want to be a member of the bar. We have many other students who come to us from all over the world and go back home to their home country and do all sorts of different types of work in firms and in corporations. So they may not need to be admitted in a US state. It may or may not be helpful to them, or even just in the hiring process. So for some of you people, you might be in a legal market where it is an advantage to have that US credential. If you look at the, the bios on the firm website, you might see that all of these people have, an LL.M degree in this, or they're admitted in this, or not. It will really depend. Another thing first of all, you want to think about, is this an advantage to my career or not? And I would suggest, looking at the career paths of different attorneys that most of our schools can also put you in touch with alumni who have maybe practiced in that area and can give you their thoughts on whether or not they did pursue bar admission. Another thing to think about is, are you eligible? So most states, as I said, each state has different kind of rules for eligibility. In New York, at least, it does require a first degree in law. So sometimes in other countries, students may have a first degree in, marketing, and then they're able to pursue, maybe they've earned a master's degree in law, but it's only a year or two. For most US states, that may not suffice. That may not make you eligible. So that's just something to think about. There are other pathways then to bar eligibility. Someone mentioned transferring to a JD program or pursuing a JD degree. So that's something to think about. Again, school representatives can usually talk to you a little bit about this. You also want to think about curriculum. So Maria just spoke about the difference between, a general LL.M or a specialized LL.M. Typically, to meet the eligibility requirements for the bar, you need to take certain types of classes and subjects that are tested, for example, on the bar. So fulfilling those academic requirements will limit a little bit your flexibility in the types of classes that you take. So if you wanted to take an LL.M very specifically, for example, at St. John's, we have a specialization in bankruptcy or insolvency law. That is 24 credits of a program, all in that particular area. So it doesn't include the credits that someone would need to be eligible for the bar. So you've got to think about your professional goals and what you want to get out of the LL.M program. Many schools will have an option, might have options, for you to add a degree or maybe do a dual degree, or they may have some options for you there, but some schools you'll need to decide in advance which track you're going to go on, bar track or not. So look at the curriculum for each program. You also have to think about planning for the bar exam. Being admitted to the bar is a lot of steps and requires a lot of paperwork. So no matter which state you're in, I guess mostly now it's online, so it's not actually on paper, but you've got to fill out a lot of forms and send in a lot of paperwork. And there's many steps to this process. And I usually advise students who are interested in the bar exam to start before they even start their LL.M program. So as soon as they're admitted, there's paperwork that we advise them to fill out. So there's lots of steps to think about. Also timing, you need to think about, the bar exam is usually offered twice a year, usually in July and February. And so then if you've got to think about when your academic program is going to end, and then are you going to be able to stay and take the bar exam? There's some questions like that. We'll talk a little bit about work opportunities after that. Taking the bar is expensive. So in any state you register for, it is an additional expense. In New York, for example, it's $750 to register to take the bar exam. We also advise students to take what's called a bar preparation course. So this is a course where you spend, 8 to 10 weeks studying all day, every day, specifically, if you can, studying for the bar exam. And so students who have, jobs or children or other responsibilities have to think about that as well, that expense and that additional time. And it's also stressful. So it's a big commitment in terms of mental energy. And if you have a family, it really is a family commitment for you to get through that time period. So there's all of these things to think about when you're thinking about the bar exam. So thank you. We'll go to the next slide. Yes. So admission to the bar, like I said, there's many steps. This is a very broad overview of these three kind of parts. Imagine a lot of little steps under each of these. So please just take this as a general starting point. But generally, you've got to think about it in this way. So you've got to have a prior education, qualifying prior education, so such as your first degree in law, and then you earn your LL.M degree. And once you do that, you'll be able to take the bar. And that's just, you get permission to take the bar. You still have to pass the bar, right? So you still got to prepare for, study for, and pass the bar, which is its own undertaking. And I said is a big commitment. And then part 3 is generally other requirements that you need to fulfill. So most states require some sort of ethics exam, and there's a certification. New York, for example, requires something called pro bono, which is service to people who need legal help but can't afford it. And in New York, you have to do 50 hours of that. And there's a few other little things that have to be done as well. So there's a lot of different parts of the process. This again is the big picture, but things to be thinking about as you're deciding about the bar. If you are looking at resources for bar admission, over 30 states allow foreign educated attorneys to be admitted to the bar. The most popular states for foreign educated attorneys to be admitted are New York and California. And most schools will be, even if they're not in that state, will be able to prepare you for one of the bar exam in one of those states. So if you're in Georgia, or if you're at Tulane, Louisiana at Tulane, or one of the other states, you can generally be prepared for New York or California. And you might ask the school if there's one that they specialize in. Usually it's more geographic. Schools on the West Coast tend to send more students to the California bar. Schools on the East Coast tend to send more students to the New York bar. It really depends. But you can attend a law school anywhere or attend an LL.M program anywhere in the country. So don't let that limit you. I would also talk to alumni and school administration. So of your school, if you're in school now, or if you're a recent graduate, or if you're a practitioner and you know people who have gone through this process, it's always a good idea to talk to them a little bit and get an idea of what it was like for them. Like I said, each state has its own process, and each country that you're coming from may have their own kind of parts of the process that would create challenges. So I suggest doing your research and talking to people about that. Talk to your mentors, your professors about whether this is a path you should pursue. And I do again recommend starting early. So if it's something that you think you're interested in, start as you're applying for your programs. And again, ask your law school representatives, admissions representatives will be happy to talk to you about this and provide more resources and point you to an alumni or in the right direction. And then we go to the next slide, which is just I'm happy to talk to you more about the bar exam. We are in New York, so we do prepare students primarily for the New York bar exam. Feel free to join me in my Zoom room to talk about that. And I know my other colleagues can give you information about how bar preparation works at their school as well. Thank you. Thanks, Sydney.
Many thanks, Lauren. So certainly pursuing an LLM degree in the US is an investment, not only in terms of resources, time, and effort, but regarding financing as well. Most institutions will have made readily available on their public websites an estimated student expense budget. And the breakdown for this will often include not only tuition, but fees such as academic fees, registration fees, specific international student fees for visa processing. Room and board might include an estimation for on-campus housing. Some institutions will provide on-campus housing, and typically, if so, on-campus housing might provide housing at a lesser market rate than perhaps off-campus housing. Certainly, if you prefer to live off campus, then you would want to take into consideration the location of the institution of your respective program and whether there might be particular neighborhoods that might provide lower market rates than others. And then regarding miscellaneous fees, my favorite advice here is to know thyself. Based on the location in which you choose to pursue your LLM degree, if you are someone who might choose to take advantage of the variety of different cultural experiences and other experiences in addition to the classroom experiences that your LLM program might offer, then you would want to account for a budget that would include, for example, dining at restaurants on weekends or attending athletic performances or cultural performances. Definitely starting the process now would be quite beneficial. Some external scholarship deadlines will actually have deadlines almost a year in advance prior to starting the LLM degree. So starting sooner rather than later is really to your benefit. Institutional scholarship deadlines will vary, and so you want to make sure and remain cognizant of the different deadlines that there might be for specific institutional scholarships. These deadlines might differ from the LLM application deadlines. You also might want to make yourself aware of a particular institution's financial aid mantra. So some institutions might provide more funding for fewer students in the form of a wealth of full tuition waivers or full scholarships, whereas other institutions might prefer to distribute funding across a wider dearth of the student body, and therefore full scholarships might be less frequent, and there might be more partial funding that is available for a wider portion of the student body. Of course, global economic fluctuation is quite constant in this world, and so you might wish to inquire about options to pay tuition in full in advance. Some institutions might offer this option. One thing to remain cognizant of would be specific tax implications in your particular home jurisdiction if you were to do so. And I think I can speak for all of my colleagues on this call in the sense that this year especially, we have been asked constantly the question of when is the right time to pursue an LLM degree? Is now the right time? And that's a very personal choice and personal decision, particularly considering the current global circumstances. And often taking financing into account is a strong consideration. At your visa appointment for your F1 visa or a J1 student visa, you will be required to provide documentation that proves that you have the funding available to sustain you through the LLM experience. During the LLM year, if you are on an F1 visa or a J1 visa, you would not be permitted to engage in paid work with the exception of part-time on-campus work. This often comes in the form of research assistantships or teaching assistantships. However, this monetary compensation is often quite minimal, often supplementing perhaps groceries on a weekly basis or providing for dinners off campus on the weekends. If you do choose to engage in off-campus employment in the form of externships or internships, you would be required in order to comply with visa regulations to apply for curricular practical training or CPT. And your institution might offer academic credit, but you would not be able to receive a monetary compensation for off-campus part-time employment during your LLM studies. Optional practical training might be an opportunity in which you choose to pursue. That would be upon completion of your LLM degree, where you might have the opportunity to remain in the US for an additional year following completion of your LLM degree studies. You would need to apply for this within 3 months of no more than 3 months out from your graduation date. And the work would need to be related to your LLM degree studies. Next slides, please, Sydney, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. Thank you. There are a variety of different options in terms of internal and external funding. So these will be program specific. Merit-based scholarships are often based on qualitative factors and components of your application, academic performance, sometimes professional experience, awards and distinctions as well. Need-based scholarships will at times require from the institution documentation that demonstrates your financial need. Named fellowships might have a variety of different application materials that are required in addition to the LLM application. So for example, additional essays that you might have to upload with your LLM application. They might have different deadlines as well. So again, it's wise to do your research well in advance to remain cognizant of any distinctions in terms of deadlines. Institutional grants often do not require repayment, whereas institutional loans often do require repayment. However, these are often at more generous rates than perhaps private loans. Regarding external resources, there are region-specific and jurisdiction-specific external funding. So some examples would be Chile's Becas Chile or Colombia's Colfuturo. So again, utilizing the resources that you have to do your research well in advance and remaining cognizant of the deadlines, because some application deadlines will be quite far in advance prior to beginning your LLM studies. There are government-funded scholarships, such as the Fulbright program, for which you might be eligible. And then there also are some organization-specific options. So for example, your law firm or your company might provide stipends for studying abroad and pursuing an LLM degree. Sometimes even full tuition scholarships might be provided. So definitely seek advice within your organization, whether you might be eligible for any funding for studying abroad. Of course, personal savings and familial financial support as well is something to think about and start planning for earlier rather than later. Private loans, particularly from US banking institutions, often require a US cosigner. And so it is often the case that LLM candidates who have obtained their law degrees, their primary law degrees from outside of the US and are not US citizens, often are not able to take advantage of private loans, but there might be some private loan options regarding your home country banks. So that's something to consider as well. And then of course, if you obtain or if you hold rather dual citizenship with the US, or if you are a US permanent resident, then you might be able to avail yourself of various federal aid options by completing what is called a FAFSA form, where you might be able to take advantage of these Stafford and Graduate Plus loans. But again, for these, you must hold US citizenship or be a US permanent resident. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Regarding resources, certainly the best resource would be LLM alumni who have pursued studies in the US. So engage with anyone who has previously completed their LLM degree studies, ask them how did they fund their LLM. There might be external resources of which you are not aware. And then of course, going directly to the source and inquiring with the admissions officers at respective LLM programs, certainly utilizing EducationUSA advisors as well. And the law school's financial aid websites can also provide helpful information. Again, that's often where most institutions will post their student expense budget. The iGrad Financial Wellness Calculator can also be helpful in terms of planning your budget for the duration of the LLM year. Next slide, please. So I welcome you to join me in Columbia's Zoom room. We will also be joined by the Assistant Dean of Graduate Degree Programs. And at this point, I think we might have some time for myself and my colleagues to take some general questions, I believe. Jason, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question, actually, I want to combine the first two questions together. Bridget and Francisco have an English related question, and Bridget wants to know if you look for a specific TOEFL section score, or if you're looking at the overall score itself. And Francisco just asks in general if LLMs require a rather high level of English.
I'm happy to address that. So I think that that is definitely a question that you need to bring to every institution that you're applying to. So, we can't really speak on behalf of every other school. I can only speak on behalf of UCLA. For us, we care about the overall TOEFL score and are not looking for specific standards in each section, but that could definitely vary from school to school. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts on that.
I would also just check, you could check with different schools on which assessments they accept. So most schools will take TOEFL and IELTS. Some more schools are now accepting the Duolingo English test. I know at St. John's we do. And some schools, if you have like a Cambridge certificate, would accept that. So just check with each school.
Okay, great. So I did get some questions sent directly to me. One of them was if the university accepts LSAC and their own application process, which do you think, or do you think it would be more personalized to send the application directly to the university?
So I would say it really depends on the school that you are considering. If you are applying to multiple law schools, it may be to your advantage to utilize LSAC, because oftentimes you will just need to compile that information once, right? So you just need to gather those transcripts, or request that those transcripts go to LSAC for the evaluation. The same thing with your letters of recommendation. So if you are applying to multiple law schools and the law schools do accept LSAC, it would be to your advantage to utilize that. For schools that will accept another application process, their own application process independent of LSAC, I do think I can't imagine that they would review the application any differently. It's just another mode in which students can submit the information, but they will be reviewed holistically again.
Okay, thank you. And I'll double up the last question here, and then we can get to the breakout rooms. Does LSAC always require a credentials evaluator, or is that or does that depend on the institution asking for that service? And the last part, which is really not related, but someone asked me here in the chat if there is an executive LLM program. In other words, based on years of experience, they want to be with people that have similar amounts of experience that they have.
Yeah, so in terms of executive LLM programs, those do exist. So I think that might also be something that Maria pointed to in terms of like a search option. When you're looking through LSAC, you could potentially search for executive programs, so that those do exist. I would also, be mindful that sometimes there is like work experience requirements for some LLM programs as well. And even if it doesn't say that that is an executive program, that is, I think, a way to sort of demonstrate to the applicants that there is some sort of an age expectation or work experience expectation. So you definitely do want to check in and just do your research with each school to ask about whether or not work experience is required to apply. And if it's not, and if you really want to do an executive program, if they are offering executive programs, because those are out there.
Okay, great. And I do have a couple more program related questions, but I want them to go into your individual Zoom links to ask those questions. So just a reminder to everyone, and again, I want to thank all of the presenters this evening or this afternoon for your time. It was fantastic, really, really, really great information. We've posted several times in the chat each one of the individual Zoom links. So now is the time for you to get your program related questions ready and go into these links where you can do a one-on-one, or, there might be other applicants in there with you, but please go ahead and now and join these specific links. I hope you're able to copy them. And like Simone said, we will stay on our call on this Zoom for a few extra minutes, just in case you need to talk with us. So go ahead and join your breakout links, and thank you again for your great presentations. It's been a great evening, and we really appreciate it. On behalf of Education USA Western Hemisphere, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.